Okay, there's always a lot of talk when we talk about, and there's that word again, cybersecurity, there's always a lot of talk about the asymmetry between the attackers and the protectors. And I know that this is a subject that you've probably heard of a lot, and I don't want to be another person to go on and on about it, but instead of elaborating more about how this asymmetry is terrible and how we suffer from it and how we should all do things better, there are people that are actually out there doing it. So my next speaker, I can't even go through this. This is going to be impossible. Has anyone here heard of the Cybersecurity Experimentation of the Future, the CEF report? I urge you, CEF report, I urge you, this is your homework, and I'll check next conference next year that everyone did their homework. I urge you to go and read it. There's a lab called DETER, D-E-T-E-R, which Ms. Terry here is going to tell us all about. And they're changing the playing field. They're changing it. They're giving us, the protectors, maybe even the advantage. And you'll excuse me for not reading your bio. We have only 3.5 hours today, but it's amazing, amazing. Lots of accomplishments. So please help me welcome on stage the deputy, just your title, the deputy director of the Internet and Networked Systems Divisions of the USC Information Science Institute, Ms. Terry Benzel. Terry, please.
Well, good morning. I hope everybody could hear me. Matan, thank you for the introduction and for your opening remarks. You know, I too had a personal experience with crypto lock and ransomware. My husband had been a network administrator in a small company for 20 plus years, and he retired in January. And the company decided to outsource his work. Since he retired, they no longer needed it. And then with 3 days, the company was shut down by ransomware. And they had to pay the money to get the company back up. They were, completely unoperational for about a week due to this. And this was in Southern California, where you've heard about several hospitals that experienced the same thing. He wasn't in the hospitals that were in the press, but very similar. But today I'm here to talk about our work deterring the hacker and looking forward into cyber experimentation of the future. Well, these first few slides, I don't need to, as we say in America often, preach to the choir. You should all understand this. But I think it's important for one moment to build on the presentations we've already heard. The reality of the systems that we see today is they're large, they're complex, they're highly interconnected, there are many legacy elements, there are systems of systems, and of course today we've been talking about the connections to the cyber-physical systems. So these pictures are meant to show an air traffic situation, a stock market, a water dam. But the flip side of the reality is the dark side. Cyber weapons or weapons are evolving, they proliferate rapidly and widely. They're shutting down businesses now with ransomware, and we're engaged in asymmetric warfare. I don't know if I've heard much of this particular terminology so far. And on our side, we need to be able to develop defenses and solutions which are effective, affordable, and rapidly and easily deployed with high assurance. But what have we been doing for all these years? Matan started out looking back into the 90s. I've been involved in cybersecurity since the early 80s. As I'm fond of saying, I must have started at about 5 years old because I can't possibly be that old. But for much of this time, what have we done? We've run faster and faster, tried to always stay ahead, penetrate and patch, react, attack, defend. Well, running faster and faster doesn't work. That's not the way to be able to make this change. You can't get ahead. You run faster and faster, and you stay in the same place. So our work is about leveling the playing field. Think about it this way. The adversary has the entire world as their test bed. They can try out any kind of an attack, a vulnerability, punch a hole in the wall for as long as they want before they actually launch that attack. And they can do it largely undetected over as much time as they need. Whereas we, the innovators, the researchers, the small companies we're hearing from today, we have very limited experimental environments. And we're working as fast as we can to simply push out our solutions. But I'll argue that what is needed is a science of cybersecurity experimentation. Other fields use experimental science to validate their research ideas. Unfortunately, in cybersecurity and often in much of computer security, we're not engaged in this scientific methodological analysis of our new innovative ideas. So our work is focused on being able to provide a framework for this experimental research, to look at it at the scale and the complexity of what we're seeing in the real world, the numbers Matan put up earlier this morning. And by doing this, we can also be able to extract some understanding and look at what the experimental research is bringing us, and finally to collect that, leverage it, and share it amongst our communities. We've been doing this for the last dozen years through the DETER Project. Our project has three key components. First, I call it research on research, or meta-research. That is, how do you do scientifically based hypothesis, experimental work to give us these kinds of insights? What are the methodologies and tools we need to enable this? Then we run and operate a large facility for cybersecurity experimentation called the DETER Lab. And finally, we have a large amount of work in spreading this through the community and doing educational activities. The DETER facility, as I said, is a large, remotely accessible, flexible platform for modeling and emulating, not just simulating, controlled study of these experimental phenomena that we're looking at. Its elements are located at the University of Southern California and also with University of California, Berkeley. It's been funded over 10 years by the Department of Homeland Security. Many of you at the opening remarks on Monday heard Dr. Douglas Mon speak, and he's been a sponsor of our work, along with the National Science Foundation and DARPA, our Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's based on some software originally developed at the University of Utah called Emulab that allows you to emulate network technologies. And it's a shared resource. So at any given time, there are multiple experimenters using that facility. It's open. It's an open facility. Academic, industrial, government researchers be able to access this through an approval process, and it's remotely accessible anywhere in the world. I'd like to say this is a somewhat older picture. Those are the older 1U pizza boxes. We've moved to lighter weight, more compact and higher density technology. Some of my team's here with me in the audience today, and they're in the process of upgrading some of our network. It's about 500. We're about to go to 700 physical PCs, and the switching infrastructure that allows us to interconnect these PCs in experimental topologies for our users. I'm not going to spend the time today, but some of the core technologies that help scientists do experimentation is our unique approach to virtualization, our approaches to orchestrating and controlling your experiment at different scales, traffic generation facilities to give you the background data that you need to do your experiment and validate your results, some unique new attributes around human behavior modeling, because of course the human role in cybersecurity is fundamental to be able to analyze also. And then clearly data collection, visualization, and situational awareness support. The DETER project and the DETER Lab facility serves multiple communities. And we've found over the years that helping our communities to instantiate the kinds of experimental methods and tools they need in specialized communities has been where the greatest value add is achieved. So it's being used in education. We've developed a number of methodologies and tools in education. It's used in looking at modeling enterprise networks or large-scale networks. And it's been used in some of the cyber-physical systems, such as particularly the electric power grid, and smart grid deployment analysis. But not only do we run the DETER facility at the University of Southern California, but we've developed relationships with partners who've taken the DETER core technology and stood up their own facility that they can then specialize for their different communities. So I'd like to call particular attention to the Israeli National Cyber Bureau version of DETER running here, run by the IUCC, and it runs its own version called CREATE. There are others at Singapore, in Canada, several universities in the United States, and one of the national labs of the Department of Energy. So one quick moment on CREATE. This is the Israeli version of DETER. It's localized. It's run here at the IUCC on the campus of Tel Aviv University. We had some excellent technical exchange meetings and meetings with the users who are starting to use this facility already this week. And my understanding is it's free to use and accessible through an online application similar to the work that we do in Los Angeles. A quick moment about education. As we all know, giving students hands-on experience in cybersecurity is very challenging. We can't let them go out and break our university networks. We don't want them releasing live malware into the internet. So we've discovered and developed a number of training exercises that are available for use in a faculty academic sort of setting. And we give a lot of help to the faculty that use these exercises so they don't have to be experts in using the DETER system themselves, and some guidance on that. Did I moved ahead? And so we've worked to develop these exercises and to provide the infrastructure support. And we tell you that the experience these students have with this kind of hands-on attack, defend, small scope, capture the flag exercises, ability to set up a firewall, a NAT, a DNSSEC, a IPv6, these sorts of exercises, is making a tremendous difference in their ability to go out and contribute in industry. You know, they go and they interview somewhere in industry, and industry, you know, might ask them a question. Well, tell me, what do you know about firewalls? So that's probably dated. They probably are asking different questions today. You know, and the student doesn't have to say, oh, it was a multiple choice question in a chapter of a lecture, you know, in my second year, I don't remember, right? Instead, they say, I know it, I did it, I built it, I tore it down, I attacked it, and I corrected it. So the education's had a tremendous impact in that area. This is an eye chart. I don't expect you to read it. And it's only just a snapshot of the kinds of organizations in the United States and throughout the world that have used the DETER lab capability. The important things to note there is on the far side, you see a lot of places that start with U in English. Those are all of our universities. And then I've highlighted a few other in different colors. You know, simply to point out in the university area, we have Columbia University, which is one of the top universities in the United States. We have international universities. You know, I've highlighted a German one, but here in Israel, we have Technion, Tel Aviv, Bar Ilan. And we then have somewhere for us like Youngstown State University, which is a very small disadvantaged school. As well, we have our government organizations and the US government and the DoD and a number of commercial companies. So what's the impact of running something like this, of having a DETER lab capability, 10 years of research on methodologies and tools? Our impact comes really in two forms of technology transition. First and foremost, the researchers, the small businesses that come and use the DETER lab facility to experiment and validate and analyze and understand their technologies, have developed technologies in small companies that are out there being marketed and helping to provide solutions to the world. Secondly, is others who have taken the DETER core software and have now built their own kinds of experimental capabilities have used this core, and so we're seeing this in our partnerships. Currently today, and the numbers change, there's over 8,000 users and educators, many top-tier research publications in security and privacy, and then we've been part of a movement in the United States around this sort of contributing to a field of the science-based experimentation, and then this report that Matan mentioned on the cyber experimentation of the future. So the answer is, DETER's been here for 10 years, we've learned a lot from it, but it's really only one point space in the general field of what is needed. So we worked through some National Science Foundation with our colleagues at SRI International and spent a year with a number of study groups and created a roadmap that's looking forward in terms of what's needed from an experimental basis in a wider world and in a wider set of requirements. And this is the report. It's available for download at cyberexperimentation.org. The report had a key finding that was actually a little bit surprising to those of us. We started this thinking about research infrastructure and new forms of test beds and what kinds of test beds should we be developing. And what we found in the study, first off, is really what's needed is transformational work in 3 areas to build a field of the science of cybersecurity experimentation. And that we needed new approaches to information sharing and rapidly being able to assemble this so that a researcher who might come in and use the test bed, who's an experienced researcher in distributed denial of service, could also work with somebody who's a routing protocol specialist or who's a worm specialist, and we can build these together. Because again, think about it. The attacker is not looking narrowly. The attacker is not saying, I'm an expert in DDoS and that's all I'm going to think about, right? The attacker is looking widely across a great field. So we need to find ways to infuse our research results with other research results. And then you need the infrastructure capabilities. Then you need the platforms for experimentation. So the vision that's painted in this roadmap is an ecosystem of different experimental capabilities that span multiple domains. So we've already looked at and heard this morning all of these domains in the IoT, in the automotive area, in manufacturing, in medical information, in computing. So how can we bring these together and build out experimental capabilities for all of us? And our vision there is that there should be some form of hybrid architectures with different kinds of building blocks. And there's no one specific building block that's going to make this kind of a capability available to us. And it changes so rapidly that really more we need to look at what are the infrastructure elements associated with that. So in summary, experimental community is a growing community. It is best served by as many of us as possible who can start to infuse a notion of experimental science into the work that we're doing in this cyber world. It's not just a proliferation of cyber, but it's a scientifically based, hypothesis-oriented, experimental approach to our community. Collaboration is the key to being able to do this, so join us at the DETERproject.org, at cyberexperimentation.org, and for those of you here in Israel, reach out to the CREATE testbed run by the IUCC and the Israeli National Cyber Bureau. Thank you very much.